I'm going to talk today about the Mace Energy Method in the context of awakening and enlightenment. This is particularly relevant if you've been in that kind of world of awakening and enlightenment, and people who followed me for a while will know that that's the kind of language I've used for a long time. Because in 2021, when I had that full recognition of our non-dual nature and the complete Book of Awakening took shape in my system, ahead of it being published in 2022, it gave me such clarity around awakening being a whole different thing than enlightenment in my world, in my language. Now, different people could talk about it in different ways and write about it in different ways and use those words differently. So you can always check what somebody means by the words they're using. But for me, awakening is the recognition of our essential, non-dual, i.e. not two, nature. And enlightenment is the clearing up of the human condition. It's the clearing up of the human programming, the human system, really. Because although there aren't really truly two here, there's not really separate people and separate objects, which is what we come to see through awakening. That doesn't change the fact that this human system has been conditioned with certain beliefs and ideas and reactivities and contractions and resistances. Because this human system has experienced things in its lifetime that have created those reactions and resistances and contractions in the system. Physically, emotionally, psychologically, it's all present, it's all still there in the human system. And although awakening absolutely can, in and of itself, lighten some of that human conditioning, and although awakening can and does make that human conditioning seem a million times less personal, if not completely impersonal, some of the reactions and contractions can still be present, especially if they're rooted in a negative identity, which is what the Mace Energy Method addresses. So after my awakening, more enlightenment continued. There had been some prior to awakening. I'd had normal coaching. I'd followed and worked with different coaches to help with that enlightenment process of the human conditioning. But after awakening, still some remained, which is very normal. It's a very normal pattern for people to follow. And so enlightenment had continued. And initially that was through a route of inclusion. So seeing the experiences as they were, seeing, oh, there's a thought here, and that thought can do me no harm. There's an emotional reaction here. And if I get present with that emotional reaction, I can just feel the sensations and I can be with the experience of how that emotion is actually showing up in the body. And sometimes being with the emotions like that would unravel them and reveal more and more about them. But then after all of that, there were still things happening in my life that didn't feel good, that didn't feel aligned with our true nature of good feelings and inclusion and lightness and joy and enthusiasm and possibility and abundance. There were still things that looked like limitation and frustration and contraction and resistance and problem. And that's why I'd still been looking for something else. And that's when the Mace Energy Method appears. And so that's why the Mace Energy Method is still relevant. No matter what your spiritual exploration has been or is, when we've got experiences that are rooted in a hidden negative identity, sometimes called shadow in some work, when something's rooted in that, it's like we really think it's who we are at a very deep level. It feels really infused into our system. It can't be, it's like we literally can't separate ourselves from it. Whereas with a thought, we can go, oh, yes, I'm aware of this thought, I'm aware of this emotion, I'm aware of this physical sensation, There's a sense of space, there's a sense of distance. But with these negative identities, they're so laced into us. They really feel like they're part of who we are, part of who we innately are. People talk about this sense of being haunted by these experiences. Like wherever I go, there it is. And so that's why the Mace Energy Method is still relevant, even if you've been in some kind of spiritual exploration. Because certainly awakening doesn't always get to those negative identities. Many enlightenment practices don't get to those negative identities, not least because we don't know about them. They're so hidden, they're so entrenched, they're so disguised behind a bunch of other human stuff that we can't recognize them. Even with mine, in fact, towards the end of 2023, I'd seen that there was a belief in my system of I am wrong. And on the face of it, it looked like a belief the same as any other belief. But it wasn't lightening. I was using different methodologies and approaches to support that, and it wasn't working. Which was, of course, perfect, because that kept me looking. That led me to negative identities. That led me to the Mace Energy Method, which is the only way I've discovered gets to that depth of entanglement, gets to that depth of false idea we have about who we think we are. And in discreating that, which is a term we use in this process, in clearing that, it can pull with it a whole bunch of the rest of the psychological and emotional stuff that goes on. We pull the charge out from the whole thing. We pull that initial resistance out so that all the other behaviors and fears and strategies and coping mechanisms and ways of avoiding and the thought patterns, it's like the charge is pulled out from all of that. So then none of that makes sense anymore, because we're no longer being run by this negative identity at the heart of it. And so that's why, even after awakening, something like the Mace Energy Method is still super valuable. Because we've awakened to our true nature. We've seen that the truth of who we are is infinite eternal awareness. Amazing. It's incredible to know that. It's incredible to truly know that none of this is really separate, that it really is one thing. But when that doesn't actually get to the resistances and reactions in the human experience, that's when we get to use the Mace Energy Method to actually unlock and clear, discreate, pull the charge out of, delete, whatever language works for you. We get rid of that what feels like an inherent part of who we are, but which really isn't. And we know it isn't because it doesn't feel good. That's our sign. There's something running the show that isn't true to who we are, and the Mace Energy Method gets to it. No matter what you've done prior to this, you could come to this brand new, never having touched a thing of personal development or spiritual development. Brilliant. But if you have, if like me, you've done all sorts of things and tried all sorts of things, and if you've actually awakened and yet you're still in these difficult experiences, then let's do the Mace Energy Method together. Get your foundation sessions booked. I'll put the links in the description. And let's get you free so that your human experience can be in alignment with the truth of our awake nature. I look forward to meeting you soon. Lots of love.